Jonathan Reese stepped into the pristine showroom, the scent of polished leather and freshly brewed coffee lingering in the air. Soft jazz hummed through the speakers, blending with the faint murmur of conversations and the rhythmic clicking of expensive shoes on the gleaming marble floor. It was a place designed to make customers feel special, provided they looked the part. Dressed in a simple polo and well-worn jeans, Jonathan moved toward a sleek silver coupe, running a hand over its perfectly sculpted curves. He had all the time in the world. At 65, he had built a lifetime of experience in the automotive industry, and patience was second nature to him. But as he stood there, observing the sales team bustling around, one thing became increasingly clear. They didn't think he was worth their time. A young salesman, sharp in a tailored navy suit, glanced in Jonathan's direction, his eyes flicking over the casual attire. His disinterest was barely concealed. With a slight shake of his head, he turned away, moving toward a well-dressed couple stepping out of a high-end SUV. Jonathan exhaled through his nose, a hint of amusement playing on his lips. He had seen this behavior before. He had witnessed the subtle, almost mechanical way people in these spaces determined who was important and who was not. That amusement, however, faded with each passing minute. 30 minutes, to be exact. Not a single employee had acknowledged him. He leaned against the coupe, watching as another man entered, a refined figure in a tailored suit, adjusting his gold cufflinks. The transformation in the showroom was instant. "Welcome, sir. What brings you in today?" One salesman nearly tripped over himself in greeting. "We have an exclusive selection in the VIP showroom. Would you like a glass of sparkling wine while we prepare a test drive?" Jonathan folded his arms, watching as they swarmed the man, eager to serve. It wasn't the service that unsettled him, it was the contrast. He decided to push the limits of their prejudice. Stepping toward the reception desk, he offered a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said. The receptionist, a young woman with sleek, straightened hair and an air of distant professionalism, barely looked up. "Sales reps are busy," she responded flatly. "If you're just looking, you can wait outside." Jonathan tilted his head. "Outside?" "Yes, sir," she replied, tapping away at her keyboard without meeting his gaze. "We try to keep the showroom clear for serious buyers. We can schedule an appointment if you're actually interested in purchasing." It wasn't just dismissive, it was a judgment. Before he could respond, another salesman approached, older, with salt and pepper hair and an air of quiet authority, at least until he spoke. "This dealership caters to a certain clientele," he said, his gaze flickering down to Jonathan's sneakers before meeting his eyes again. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Jonathan held his stare. "Are you?" A flicker of irritation crossed the man's face before he forced a tight-lipped smile. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned lot. We have excellent financing options, if that's a concern." Jonathan let the insult settle, his fingers curling slightly against the edge of the desk. This wasn't about customer service. This was deliberate exclusion. He glanced back toward the well-dressed customer, now sipping sparkling wine, while a salesman practically polished his shoes with compliments. Slowly, Jonathan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and scrolled through his contacts. He found the number he was looking for and pressed call. It rang twice before a deep voice answered. "I need you here, now." Then he hung up, slipping the phone back into his pocket. The employees had no idea who they had just dismissed, but they were about to find out. Jonathan Reese had always believed in the power of hard work and humility. He built his business from the ground up, starting with a small used car dealership and expanding into one of the most successful luxury automotive chains in the country. But despite his wealth and status, he had never forgotten where he came from, or how people tended to judge others before they even spoke. That was why he found himself standing inside one of his own dealerships, dressed in a simple polo and jeans, watching as his employees dismissed him without a second thought. He had been standing near a sleek silver coupe for over 30 minutes. 30 minutes of waiting, of watching, of being completely ignored. He wasn't in a hurry. He had all the time in the world. But that wasn't the point. The point was that not a single person had acknowledged him. Meanwhile, a well-dressed man had strolled in, adjusting the gold cufflinks on his crisp white shirt, and the staff had practically tripped over themselves to serve him. Champagne was offered, the VIP showroom was mentioned, and hands were extended in warm, enthusiastic greetings. Jonathan exhaled slowly. It wasn't just about service, it was about contrast. Deciding to push the test further, he walked over to the reception desk, offering a polite smile. "Excuse me," he said. The receptionist barely glanced at him. Her voice was clipped, uninterested. "Sales reps are busy. If you're just looking, you can wait outside." Jonathan tilted his head slightly. "Outside?" She tapped away at her keyboard, still not looking at him. "Yes, sir. We try to keep the showroom clear for serious buyers. We can schedule an appointment if you're actually interested in purchasing." There it was. The words weren't just dismissive, they were a judgment. They had already decided what kind of person he was before even asking a single question. Before he could respond, another salesman approached. He was older, with salt and pepper hair and a name tag that read Ron. He didn't smile. He didn't greet him. Instead, he sized him up with one glance. "This dealership caters to a certain clientele," Ron said, his eyes flicking down to Jonathan's well-worn sneakers before meeting his gaze again. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Jonathan held his stare. "Are you?" A flicker of irritation crossed Ron's face before he forced a thin smile. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned lot. We have excellent financing options, if that's a concern." Jonathan let the insults sit between them. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. He could feel the shift in the room now, not because they wanted to help him, but because they wanted him gone. The reception area had gone quiet, employees subtly watching from the corners of their eyes, waiting to see what he would do. Jonathan had spent his entire life understanding how people made assumptions based on appearances. He had learned it early, watching his father, a hard-working mechanic, get treated differently depending on how he showed up. He had never forgotten one particular lesson. His father had a long-time client, Mr. Dawson, a well-off businessman who always arrived in a spotless black Cadillac. Whenever Mr. Dawson pulled up, he was given the best service. People rushed to accommodate him, offered him the best seat, laughed a little too hard at his jokes. But one day, Mr. Dawson's Cadillac was in the shop. He arrived in a rusted old pickup, dressed in work clothes, and suddenly, he wasn't Mr. Dawson anymore. He was just another guy. Jonathan never forgot that. And standing here, he saw the exact same thing happening, except this time, it was happening to him. He glanced toward the well-dressed man, still lounging comfortably in a luxury vehicle, running his hands over the leather-wrapped steering wheel as a salesman detailed the car's features with practiced enthusiasm. Then, he looked back at Ron. "Let me get this straight," Jonathan said, his voice calm but firm. "You haven't asked if I have an appointment. You haven't asked what I do for a living. You haven't asked if I'm here to buy." His gaze didn't waver. "But you've already decided I don't belong here." Ron didn't even flinch. "Sir, we cater to a very specific clientele, you understand?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "I think I do." Ron nodded, mistaking Jonathan's calm demeanor for acceptance. But Jonathan wasn't accepting anything. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It rang twice. "I need you here," Jonathan said simply. "Now." Then he hung up. The employees had no idea what was about to happen, but they were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Jonathan Reese stood in the middle of his own dealership, dressed in a simple polo and jeans, watching as his employees dismissed him as if he were invisible. He had been there for over half an hour, running his hand over the smooth, polished curves of a silver luxury coupe, waiting to see if anyone would acknowledge him. No one did. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. A young salesman in a crisp navy suit had flicked his eyes over Jonathan, assessing his casual attire with a look of quiet disinterest. Without a second glance, the salesman turned on his heel, moving toward a well-dressed couple stepping out of a high-end SUV. Jonathan exhaled through his nose, watching the pattern unfold. He had seen this type of behavior before, but the reality of it never stopped surprising him. Then, just as expected, everything changed in an instant. A man walked into the showroom, adjusting the gold cufflinks on his tailored white shirt. His entrance was effortless, his presence commanding. He hadn't even spoken yet, and already the sales team had transformed. "Welcome, sir." One salesman nearly tripped over himself to greet him. "We have an excellent selection in our VIP showroom. Would you like a glass of champagne while we prepare a test drive?" Jonathan folded his arms, watching as the employees practically polished the man's shoes with compliments. It wasn't the service that bothered him. It was the contrast. Finally, he decided to push the test a little further. He stepped toward the reception desk, offering a polite smile. "Excuse me." The receptionist barely looked up. Her tone was flat, detached. "Sales reps are busy. If you're just looking, you can wait outside." Jonathan tilted his head slightly. "Outside?" She sighed, already returning her focus to her computer screen. "Yes, sir. We try to keep the showroom clear for serious buyers. We can schedule an appointment if you're actually interested in purchasing." There it was, the assumption, the judgment. Before he could respond, another salesman approached. An older man, salt and pepper hair, stiff posture, the kind of person who had spent decades believing he could size someone up at a glance. "Sir, this dealership caters to a certain clientele." His eyes flicked downward to Jonathan's scuffed sneakers before returning to his face. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Jonathan held his gaze. "Are you?" A flicker of irritation crossed the salesman's face before he forced a tight-lipped smile. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned lot? We have excellent financing options if that's a concern." Jonathan let the insult hang in the air. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was disrespect, dressed up as professionalism. He glanced over at the well-dressed man, now reclining comfortably in the driver's seat of a brand-new luxury car, sipping champagne while a salesman listed off the endless features. Jonathan reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts, found the number he was looking for, and pressed call. It rang twice before a deep voice answered. "I need you here, now." Jonathan ended the call and tucked his phone back into his pocket. The employees had no idea who they had just dismissed, but they were about to find out. Minutes later, the entire energy in the showroom shifted. A sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up to the entrance. Its polished surface reflected the afternoon sunlight, gleaming like a monument to quiet power. The valet rushed forward, opening the door with the kind of urgency reserved for the most important guests. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped out, adjusting his cufflinks as he scanned the room through the glass before pushing the doors open. And then, silence. The employees who had ignored Jonathan for over 30 minutes suddenly stood straighter, adjusting their ties, smoothing their suits. The same receptionist who had barely looked at him before was now staring at him like he had just transformed into someone else entirely. Ron, the salesman who had told Jonathan to check out the pre-owned lot, visibly stiffened. The suited man walked with purpose, his leather shoes tapping against the marble floor. He scanned the showroom, then locked eyes with Jonathan. And then he smiled. "Sir," he said with quiet deference, "apologies for the delay." Jonathan nodded as if nothing was out of the ordinary. But the employees? They looked like they had just seen a ghost. Ron took a step forward, his voice shaking slightly. I don't believe we've met." The suited man turned to him, face unreadable. "I'm David Langford, regional manager." His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "And I believe you're the one I'm here to see?" The air in the showroom changed completely. Ron's face drained of color. The other employees froze, their eyes darting between Jonathan and David, trying to piece together what was happening. Jonathan let the silence stretch, his gaze calm but unrelenting. Then, in a voice that was dangerously even, he asked one simple question. "So tell me, is this how we treat people here?" The weight of those words hit like a hammer. Ron opened his mouth, but no words came out. Jonathan didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to get angry. The truth was already loud enough. David turned to the staff, his expression unreadable. Then, his voice sharp and professional, he said the words that would seal their fate. "Effective immediately, everyone involved in today's incident is terminated." And just like that, the judgment they had so easily passed on him came full circle. Some lessons are learned the easy way. Others come at a cost. Jonathan Reese stepped into the grand showroom of Prestige Motors, the crown jewel of his luxury automotive empire. The air smelled of polished leather and fresh espresso, while soft jazz played through hidden ceiling speakers. Every detail of this dealership had been designed to exude exclusivity. Yet, as he stood there in a simple polo and jeans, the people meant to represent his business barely noticed him. He watched as a well-dressed couple entered. The shift was immediate. Salesmen perked up, smiles widened, voices softened with charm. A manager stepped forward with an outstretched hand, ushering them toward the VIP lounge, offering espresso and champagne as though welcoming royalty. Jonathan, however, remained invisible. He walked slowly past rows of gleaming luxury vehicles, running a hand along the frame of a sleek black convertible. He wasn't just looking, he was watching. The staff weren't just busy, they were choosing to ignore him. For 20 minutes, not a single employee had greeted him. No "good afternoon, sir," no "can I help you find something," just indifference. Deciding to push further, he approached the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset, didn't even glance up. "Sales reps are busy. If you're just looking, you can wait outside." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Outside?" he repeated, tilting his head slightly. "Yes, sir," she replied, still tapping at her keyboard. "We try to keep the showroom clear for serious buyers. If you'd like to book an appointment." The words weren't just dismissive, they were a judgment. Before he could respond, an older salesman with salt and pepper hair and a stiff posture approached. His name tag read, "Ron." "Sir, this dealership caters to a certain clientele." His gaze dropped to Jonathan's scuffed sneakers before meeting his eyes again. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at our pre-owned lot. We have excellent financing options, if that's a concern." Jonathan let the silence stretch. He wanted them to hear their own words. A few feet away, the well-dressed couple was now seated in a plush leather chair, sipping complimentary champagne while a salesman detailed every luxury feature with enthusiasm. And here he was, being told to try the used car lot down the road. Jonathan exhaled slowly, reaching into his pocket. He scrolled through his contacts, found the name he was looking for, and pressed call. It rang twice. "I need you here, now." The employees had no idea who they had just dismissed. But they were about to find out. The value of respect. Respect is one of life's simplest yet most powerful principles. It costs nothing, yet it defines character, shapes relationships, and determines how we treat one another. Jonathan Ray's experience in his own dealership is a reminder that judgment based on appearances can lead to costly mistakes, both in business and in life. For many older adults, this lesson resonates deeply. Over the years, we've seen how society often values wealth, status, and outward appearances over integrity, wisdom, and kindness. But true character isn't measured by material possessions. It's reflected in how we treat people, regardless of who they are or what they look like. In everyday life, this lesson applies to the way we interact with strangers, the way businesses serve customers, and even how we perceive those around us. A moment of kindness, a fair chance, or even a simple greeting can change someone's day or even their life. Jonathan's story reminds us of a timeless truth. Respect isn't something we give only to those we think are important. It's something we owe to everyone.